The night Cassie and Wolf stopped loving me, I felt it. Not the way you feel a door slam or a phone go silent. I felt it the way I feel everything. Deep in my chest, like a frequency shift. Like the warmth that used to pour off him whenever he walked into a room just tuned itself to a different channel. One I wasn't on anymore. I didn't say anything. I smiled, fixed his tie, and handed him his coffee. That's the thing nobody tells you about feeling everything. Sometimes knowing hurts worse than being lied to. My name is Elliot Voss Wolf, 26 years old. Omega, husband to Cassie and Wolf, alpha king of the Wolf Mafia, which sounds terrifying until you realize the man irons his own dress shirts and loses his mind when the housekeeper moves his stapler 2 inches to the left. We live in a glass and steel penthouse on the 43rd floor of a high-rise in downtown Denver, Colorado, where the Rockies sit in the distance like they're keeping score. The city sprawls below us like it's performing for him. Everything in Cassian's life performs for him, including me, for a while. My ability showed up when I was 14, the day my father's business partner shook his hand at a dinner party, and I felt the man's greed like hot tar sliding under my skin. I excused myself, threw up in the bathroom, and came back to the table smiling. My mother always said I had good manners. What I have is emotion manipulation. I can feel what you feel. Every flicker, every lie dressed up as affection, every guilt poorly disguised as a goodnight kiss. And if I want to, I can push back. Amplify your joy, dull your rage, and unravel your carefully constructed calm until you're standing in the middle of your own truth with nowhere to hide. I've only ever used it defensively. I've never manipulated Cassian, not once. Not even when I probably should have. That's also called love, I think, or stupidity. I keep getting those two confused. It started small, the way all devastating things do. A Tuesday in March. Cassian came home at 2 a.m., smelling like someone else's perfume, and when he kissed my temple, the emotion that rolled off him wasn't guilt. It was relief. Relief that I was asleep. Relief that I didn't ask questions. Relief that I was, as always, easy. I was not asleep. I lay in our California King with my eyes closed and my chest absolutely on fire. Funin and I cataloged every note of what he was feeling the way a sommelier catalogs wine. Underneath the expensive scotch and the residual adrenaline of whatever meeting he claimed to have, there it was, warm, tender, directed at nothing in this room. I pressed my lips together and said nothing. The next morning I made us both breakfast. Eggs over easy, turkey bacon, the kind of fresh squeezed orange juice that takes 10 minutes and ruins your wrist. Cassian sat at the kitchen island in his robe, scrolling through his phone with that small, private smile he used to say for me. "You're in a good mood," I said pleasantly, setting his plate down. "Long night," he said, "but productive." The emotion coming off him when he said that word, productive, was warm and golden and had absolutely nothing to do with business. I picked up my fork. I said. "Eggs okay?" "Perfect," he said, not looking up from his phone. I smiled at my plate. Yeah, I thought, feeling his contentment wrap around him like a second skin that didn't include me. They always are. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, I've been quietly, methodically, calmly losing my mind. Here's what people get wrong about Omegas like me. They assume we're soft, decorative, the kind of person who cries in the pantry and forgives everything because the alternative is too scary. And sure, I own a lot of cashmere. I make excellent soup. I once cried at a dog food commercial, which I will deny under oath. But soft doesn't mean blind. And I have never, not once in 3 years of marriage to Cassian Wolf, been blind. I knew what I married. An alpha who led the most powerful pack in the Rocky Mountain region, whose name made other alphas straighten their spines at dinner parties. A man who was beautiful in the way sharp things are beautiful, something to admire from a careful distance. A man whose emotional walls were so thick, I'd spent the first year of our marriage pressing my hand to his chest just to check he had a pulse under all that control. He did. He does. It just doesn't beat for me the way it used to. My mother called last week to ask how married life was treating me. Wonderful, I told her, standing in our kitchen watching Cassian leave for what he called a meeting, and what I now understood with absolute emotional clarity was something else entirely. "He's so good to you," she said warmly. "The best," I agreed. "I am a spectacular liar for someone who can feel the truth of everything." The morning everything changed started like every other morning. Cassian in his charcoal Tom Ford suit, me in my robe, the Denver skyline doing its thing outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, his driver waiting downstairs, the faint smell of his cedar and bergamot cologne that used to make my pulse do something embarrassing and now just made me tired. He kissed my cheek on the way out, and for 1 second, just one, I reached out with that quiet, invisible part of me and let myself feel him. What I got nearly knocked me off my feet. Not guilt, not love, not even indifference. Excitement, bright and sharp and buzzing. The kind of feeling you carry when you're about to see someone you've been counting down the hours to see. He pulled back, smoothed his lapel, didn't notice my knuckles had gone white around my coffee mug. "Don't wait up," he said. The elevator doors closed. I stood there in our perfect, expensive, 43rd floor silence, and I made a decision. I was done feeling everything for a man who felt nothing for me. I was going to disappear. The thought sat in my chest like a lit match. Small, quiet, and absolutely serious. Not dramatically. I wasn't going to throw his belongings off the balcony or write him a letter in red ink or do anything that required a cleanup crew. I had too much self-respect for theatrics and too little energy for anything that involved raising my voice before 9 a.m. I was just going to leave, quietly, completely, the way Cassian had already left me, without announcement, without apology, without even the basic decency of a conversation. I set my coffee mug down on the marble counter and looked around our kitchen. 43 floors above Denver, morning light cutting across the Italian tile. Everything expensive, everything curated, everything selected by an interior designer named Jeff, who charged by the adjective. It was a beautiful cage, and I had been the world's most well-dressed bird. I gave myself exactly 4 minutes to feel sorry for myself. 4 minutes is generous. Some people take years. I had a schedule. I pressed my palms flat against the cool marble and breathed, and in that breathing, I did what I always do when I need to think clearly. I pulled my ability inward, gathered it like a tide pulling back from shore. He stopped feeling the residual warmth of Cassian's excitement still hanging in the air of the apartment, like expensive, traitorous cologne. Without it, the kitchen felt quieter, colder, better. I could think straight when I wasn't drowning in someone else's feelings. The plan formed fast, because I am, despite everything, an extremely efficient person. I would need somewhere to go. I would need money that wasn't connected to Cassian's accounts, which meant the personal savings account I had maintained since before the marriage. The one my financial advisor called admirably cautious and Cassian called unnecessarily independent. He'd meant it as a mild criticism. I had taken it as a compliment. I pushed off the counter and walked to the bedroom. The closet was the size of most people's apartments. On the Cassian side was architectural, dark suits arranged by weight, shoes that cost more than car payments, a drawer of cufflinks he rotated with the seriousness of a military operation. My side was warmer, softer. A life in cashmere and broken-in denim, and the good sneakers I wore on mornings when I walked to the farmer's market 3 blocks over, because I liked the way the city smelled before it fully woke up. I pulled down a weekender bag from the top shelf. Then I stopped. Because the thing about having emotion manipulation as a superpower is that it works even when you don't want it to. Even when you're trying very hard to be logical and calm and exit strategy oriented, sometimes the residue of feelings soaked into physical objects reaches up and grabs you by the throat. I touched the handle of the bag and felt him. Not current Cassian, not excited to see his mistress Cassian, old Cassian, year 1 Cassian, the version of my husband who had packed this bag himself when we went to Aspen for our first anniversary, who had been so nervous about the trip going well that his anxiety had hummed off him like a plucked string the entire drive up, who had stood in a snow-covered parking lot at 10 o'clock at night and said very quietly, like it cost him something to admit it, "I want you to be happy here." Not "I love you." Cassian was never built for easy declarations, but that feeling, that desperate, earnest, wanting me to be happy. I had kept it, the way you press a flower between pages, the way you save a voicemail you've already memorized. I stood in our closet for 11 seconds holding a weekender bag and feeling a ghost. And then I set it on the bed and started packing. I was folding my 3rd sweater when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Not Cassian. He never texted before noon. It was my best friend, Marcus Reed, who was a beta, chronically chaotic, and the only person on earth who knew even half of what was going on in my marriage. "Why does my gut feel weird this morning?" he texted. "Did something happen or did I just eat bad leftovers?" I stared at the message. Marcus had no powers, no abilities, just genuinely, aggressively good instincts and an emotional radar he refused to take any credit for. I typed back, "Probably the leftovers. How long were they in your fridge?" 3 seconds. Elliot Voss Wolf. How long were what in whose fridge? Answer the actual question. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my half-packed bag. "I'm leaving," I typed. Not a big deal. Very calm, extremely collected. The typing bubble appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again, and then, "I'm outside in 12 minutes. "You live in Aurora," I typed back. "That's 40 minutes away." "Then I'm already speeding. Don't move." I looked at the bag. I looked at the closet. I looked at the Denver skyline through the bedroom window, all steel and morning gold and indifferent beauty. Somewhere across this city, my husband was walking towards someone who made him feel bright and buzzing and alive. And I was sitting on my bed at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday, clutching a sweater and waiting for my friend to break several traffic laws on my behalf. I exhaled slowly. "Okay," I said quietly to the empty room. "Okay." The match in my chest was still burning, and for the first time in 6 weeks, oh man, I stopped trying to put it out. I finished packing in silence. Not the sad kind of silence. Not the kind where you pause every 30 seconds to stare at a wall and question your life choices. The productive kind. The kind that lives just underneath a decision that has already been made and doesn't need to be revisited. 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of jeans, my running shoes, the small leather notebook I use for writing things I never intended anyone to read, my medication, my charger, the tiny succulent on the bathroom windowsill that Cassian had bought me 14 months ago from a street vendor outside a coffee shop on Colfax Avenue because I'd stopped to look at it for 4 seconds and he'd noticed. I almost left the succulent. Then I picked it up and packed it anyway. Not because I was sentimental. Because I'd kept that plant alive for 14 months, and it deserved better than being forgotten on a windowsill in a marriage that was quietly composting. I zipped the bag, stood up straight, looked at myself in the full-length mirror on the back of the closet door. Omega, 26, good cheekbones. Currently in the process of quietly dismantling his entire life before 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. "You look great," I told my reflection, completely sincerely. Then I picked up my bag and walked out of the bedroom. Marcus arrived in 11 minutes, which meant he had genuinely been speeding, and I felt zero guilt about that because he once told me that traffic laws were more of a suggestion when delivered in that particular tone. So really, this was on his personal philosophy. When I was standing in the lobby of the building when his beat-up silver Honda pulled up to the curb with the energy of a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say the entire drive over. He stepped out without cutting the engine, took one look at me standing there with my weekender bag and my succulent, and pressed his mouth into a flat, complicated line. "The plant," he said. "Don't," I said. "I'm just saying." "Marcus." "Okay." He took the bag from my shoulder without being asked, threw it in the back seat, and held the passenger door open with the solemnity of someone presenting evidence in court. "Get in." I got in. He got in. We sat there for exactly 4 seconds while the heat pumped through the vents and Denver moved around us, completely unbothered by my personal crisis. "Do you want to talk about it?" Marcus said. Or do you want me to just drive?" I looked straight ahead through the windshield. "Drive," I said. "But you can also talk." "I'm not fragile, Marcus. I'm furious, which is a completely different thing." He pulled away from the curb. "Okay," he said carefully. "Where are we going?" I had thought about this while packing. I had a cousin, Devin, who lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill and who owed me a favor from 2021 that we had never officially discussed, but both silently acknowledged. Devin was also extremely unbothered by drama, which was either a character strength or a medical condition, and either way it made him the perfect temporary landing pad. "Capitol Hill," I said. "Devin's place." Marcus nodded like this was completely reasonable. Because Marcus Reed was the rare kind of friend who understood that sometimes you needed to make a large, irreversible decision, and what you required in that moment was not a debate, it was a driver. I loved him dearly. "Can I ask one question?" he said. "You're going to ask it regardless." Did he do something specific or was it the accumulation? I watched the city slide past the window, the coffee shops opening their doors, the morning joggers along Cheeseman Park, a man walking a dog so large it was functionally a small horse, Denver doing its Wednesday thing, indifferent and lovely. He came home, I said slowly, smelling like someone else, and the emotion coming off him wasn't guilt. Silence. What was it? Marcus asked quietly. I turned the succulent over in my lap. Happiness, I said. The real kind. The kind he used to feel when he looked at me. Marcus said nothing for a moment. The traffic light ahead turned red, and he stopped and just sat there with his hands on the wheel, and I felt what he was feeling without even meaning to. A low, steady burn of anger on my behalf, wrapped around something softer that was just plain heartbreak for a situation he'd probably seen coming longer than I had. You felt it directly, he said. It wasn't a question. I feel everything directly. That's the fun part of being me. I'm fine, Marcus. You packed your plant. She's a living thing, and she needed rescuing, like me. We're basically the same. I held the succulent up to the window like it deserved to see the city. Her name is Gerald, by the way. You named your succulent Gerald. He looked like a Gerald. Marcus laughed. It was short and reluctant and real, and the tension in the car dropped exactly 1 degree, which was enough. We drove, and behind us, 43 floors up, in a penthouse full of expensive silence and cedar bergamot cologne, my husband was probably already crafting a reason he'd be home late tonight. He wouldn't check on me until evening. By then, I'd already be gone. The thought should have felt more dramatic than it did. In movies, this is the part where the strings swell and the protagonist stares moodily out the window while rain tracks down the glass in perfect cinematographic lines. What actually happened was that Marcus took a wrong turn on 7th Avenue, blamed the GPS with genuine personal offense, and I had to navigate us back using the mental map I'd built from 3 years of living in this city, with a man who treated Denver like his personal kingdom, and me like a very beloved piece of furniture in it. Turn left here, I said. The GPS said right. The GPS is wrong. The GPS is a satellite system, El. And I am an Omega with functioning eyes and a better sense of direction than whatever underpaid algorithm is running that app. Turn left. He turned left. We arrived at Devin's building 4 minutes later. Marcus did not say anything about the GPS. Some battles are won in silence. Devin's apartment building was the architectural opposite of my penthouse. 6 floors, exposed brick. An elevator that worked 70% of the time and spent the other 30% making a sound that could generously be described as concerning. Devin met us at the door of his apartment on the 4th floor in sweatpants and a faded University of Colorado hoodie, holding a mug of coffee, looking like a man who had received exactly enough warning to be awake, but not enough to be fully functional. He looked at me. He looked at the weekender bag on my shoulder. He looked at the succulent in my hands. Kitchen table's clear, he said, stepping aside. I just made a fresh pot. This is why Devin was my cousin. He understood that sometimes hospitality means asking 0 questions and offering caffeine. I walked in and set Gerald carefully on his windowsill above the kitchen sink where the morning light came through at a good angle. Devin watched me do this with the expression of a man who had many thoughts and was choosing, wisely, to have them privately. Marcus dropped into a chair at the kitchen table like he lived there. She needs a place to stay, he said completely casually, like he was discussing the weather. I corrected, pouring myself coffee. He needs a place to stay, Marcus amended without missing a beat. Devin looked at me over his mug. He was 31, quieter than me, more careful with his words. He had his mother's eyes and his father's stubbornness, and an ability to read a room that had nothing to do with supernatural powers and everything to do with growing up in a family that communicated primarily through implication. How long, he asked. I don't know yet, I said honestly. He nodded, slow, thoughtful. The room's yours, he said. There are clean towels under the sink. Don't touch the leftovers in the blue container. Those are spoken for. I would never. You absolutely would. You're a snacker when you're stressed. I'm not stressed. I'm restructuring. Devin and Marcus exchanged a look over my head that I pretended not to see because I was a bigger person than that, mostly. I sat down at the kitchen table with my coffee and looked at my hands. They were steady. That surprised me a little. I had expected some trembling, some visible sign that my body understood the size of what I was doing, But my hands were completely steady, and my breathing was even, and the only thing moving too fast was the quiet, low-grade hum of emotion running under my skin. Not mine. Cassian's. That was the part I hadn't accounted for. Oh, even 40 blocks away, sitting in my cousin's kitchen in Capitol Hill, I could still feel the faint residual signature of my husband's emotions, the way you can still smell a bonfire on your jacket hours after you've left it. 3 years of proximity, 3 years of sleeping beside him, sharing meals with him, pressing my hand to his chest in the dark just to feel the rhythm of him. His emotional frequency was written into me, like a language I'd learned before I knew I was learning it. Right now, that frequency was bright and absorbed and completely, utterly elsewhere. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said carefully, watching me with the particular attention he used when he was trying to gauge how close to the edge I actually was. "Shit, you're going to anyway." "What does it feel like," he said, "when you feel him feeling someone else?" The kitchen was quiet. Devin was looking at his coffee. The refrigerator hummed. I thought about it genuinely, because Marcus deserved a genuine answer, and because I was done performing fine for an audience of people who could see right through me. "Like holding a phone to your ear," I said slowly, "and hearing someone laugh at a joke you didn't hear. You know the joy is real. You just aren't part of it." Marcus exhaled through his nose. Devin set his mug down very quietly. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then I straightened in my chair, rolled my shoulders back, and picked up my coffee with the energy of a man who had decided that self-pity had a time limit, and that time limit was now expired. "Right," I said briskly. "So, Master Devin, the blue container. What's actually in it, and how negotiable is that boundary?" Devin blinked. Then, despite everything, he laughed. And just like that, the kitchen breathed again. Devin told me the blue container had leftover green chili chicken enchiladas from a place on South Broadway that he treated with the reverence most people reserved for religious artifacts. I told him that was reasonable, and that I would respect the boundary. Marcus immediately asked if there was a second container. Devin said no. Marcus looked personally victimized. This was the texture of the next hour. Small, ordinary. The kind of conversation that exists specifically to give your nervous system somewhere soft to land when the rest of your life is actively rearranging itself without your permission. I let it happen. I participated. I even laughed twice, genuinely, at something Marcus said about his upstairs neighbor, and a disagreement involving a drum kit and a noise complaint filed in the form of a strongly worded letter slid under the door at midnight. But underneath all of it, steady and quiet and impossible to ignore, Cassian's emotional signal kept humming at the edge of my awareness. Still bright, still warm, still pointed somewhere that was not me. I had never hated my ability more than I did in that moment. My phone screen lit up on the table at 11:47 a.m. All three of us looked at it. Cassian Wolf. Calling. The name sat on the screen like it owned the table, which, knowing Cassian, it probably assumed it did. Marcus and Devin both went very still in the specific way of people who are pretending extremely hard to be casual. I looked at the phone. The phone kept ringing. Here is the thing about receiving a call from your husband when you are sitting 40 blocks away from your shared life with a weekender bag and a rescued succulent. There is a version of this moment where you answer and say something devastating and perfectly constructed that communicates the precise weight of your pain in a way that lands cleanly and changes everything. I did not do that. I let it ring. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail. The screen went dark. Devin exhaled. Marcus picked up his coffee with the energy of a man returning from a near-death experience. "Okay," he said. "Okay," I agreed. 30 seconds later, a text. "Lunch today. There's a thing at the Wolf Tower boardroom at 2, but I could do 12:30 at Elway's if you want." I read it twice. Elway's was our place. Had been since the 2nd month of our marriage when Cassian had taken me there, for no reason other than that I'd mentioned once, offhandedly, that I liked the lighting. He'd remembered. He'd made a reservation. He'd pretended it was spontaneous, and I had pretended to believe him, because watching Cassian Wolf attempt romance was one of the quiet joys of my life. Used to be. I put my phone face down on the table. "He wants to do lunch," I said, to no one in particular. "Are you going?" Devin asked carefully. "No. Are you going to tell him where you are?" I thought about that, really thought about it, turning it over with the same care I use when handling something I knew could cut me if I wasn't paying attention. Not yet, I said. Devin nodded. No judgment. No lecture about communication and healthy conflict resolution. Just a nod. The way you acknowledge a decision that belongs entirely to someone else. This was why Devin was my favorite cousin. I had 6. The bar was not low. What I had not told Marcus, what I had not told Devin, what I had not told anyone because there was no version of saying it out loud that didn't sound either tragic or insane, was this. I had known about the mistress for 4 weeks. Not suspected. Known. There had been a night, 3 weeks and 5 days ago, when Cassian had come home and sat beside me on the couch while I was reading, and he'd put his hand over mine in that absent, habitual way he had. The way you touch something familiar without looking at it. And the emotion that moved through that point of contact had hit me like a wave I wasn't braced for. Guilt, finally, sharp and specific and directed inward. But underneath the guilt, woven through it the way a thread runs through fabric, something that gutted me far more completely, tenderness, for someone. A specific someone whose emotional shape I didn't recognize, but whose existence in my husband's inner world was suddenly undeniably real. I had closed my book. I had said very calmly, "Long day," and Cassian had said, "The usual," and squeezed my hand, and the guilt had spiked hard enough that I'd had to breathe through it. I had sat with him for another hour. I had turned off the lamp when we went to bed. I had not said a single word, because here is the part that made no logical sense, and yet was completely, humiliatingly true. I had stayed those 4 weeks not because I was weak, not because I was afraid, not because I didn't know what to do. I had stayed because some stubborn, irrational, deeply inconvenient part of me had wanted to believe that what I felt through Cassian's guilt meant he was already ending it, that he was choosing me without being asked, that I would not have to be the one to blow this whole beautiful, broken thing apart. He hadn't chosen me. He'd chosen Elways for lunch, which was somehow worse. I picked up my phone. I typed, "Can't today, busy," sent it before I could write anything more honest. 3 dots appeared immediately, then stopped, then appeared again. Then, "Everything okay?" My chest pulled tight. "Sure," I whispered to the empty air. "Everything's perfect, Cassian." I put the phone back down and did not cry. It was genuinely one of my better performances. Marcus knew it too. He had that look on his face, the one he got when he was deciding between saying the true thing and saying the kind thing, and was privately annoyed that those were not the same thing. He chose kind. "You want to take a walk?" he said. "Get out of this kitchen for a bit?" I considered the kitchen. The coffee that had gone lukewarm. Gerald on the windowsill, already looking more comfortable than I felt. Devin pretending to read something on his phone with the focused intensity of a man who was absolutely not reading anything on his phone. "Yeah," I said. "Okay." We left Devin to his territorial enchiladas and took the stairs down because the elevator was making that sound again, the one that suggested it had opinions about its workload, and I had enough conflict in my life without negotiating with elevator machinery. The street outside was cold and bright. Not the way Denver got in late morning when the sun was fully up, but the temperature hadn't caught up yet. My breath came out in small, soft clouds. The city smelled like coffee and exhaust and the faint mineral bite of snow somewhere in the mountains that hadn't reached us yet. I pulled my jacket tighter and we walked. We made it half a block before my phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. A text from a number I didn't recognize, which was unusual because Cassian's people had standing instructions that unknown contacts did not reach me directly. It was one of the small, quietly controlling things about being married to the alpha king of the wolf Mafia that I had long since stopped noticing. The text said, "You should know where your husband was last Thursday night. Check the attached." No name, no context. Just a photo file sitting there like a small, patient bomb. I stopped walking. Marcus stopped 2 steps ahead of me and turned around. "What?" he said, reading my face with the accuracy of someone who had known me for 11 years. I showed him the screen without opening the photo. He looked at the unknown number, looked at me. His jaw tightened slightly. "You don't have to open that," he said. "I know. L. I know, Marcus." I opened it. The photo was taken from a distance, slightly grainy in the way of pictures captured on a phone through a restaurant window at night. But the resolution was clear enough, more than clear enough. Cassian, at a corner table at a restaurant I recognized as guard, which was a place in Cherry Creek that required reservations 6 weeks in advance and had a wine list that came in a leather binder. Sitting across from him was a man, not a woman, a man, younger than Cassian by maybe 5 years, with dark hair and a jaw that could cut glass, leaning across the table with the relaxed proprietary ease of someone who had done this many times before. His hand was on the table, close to Cassian's. Not touching, almost. Cassian was looking at him the way I had not seen Cassian look at anything in over a year, like he was the most interesting thing in the room. I stood on the sidewalk in Capitol Hill at 11:53 in the morning and felt the photo land in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples went all the way down. Marcus had moved to my shoulder, was looking at the screen. "Okay," he said quietly. "Yeah," I said. Yeah." We stood there for a moment. A cyclist went past. A woman with a stroller navigated around us with the practiced patience of someone used to people standing in inconvenient places. Here is what I felt, cataloging it the way I always catalog things because it was the only way I knew how to survive them. Shock, but not the sharp kind, the slow kind. The kind that arrives when something you half knew becomes something you fully know, and the distance between those two things turns out to be enormous. And underneath the shock, something I was not expecting. A strange, terrible clarity. Because the man in that photo, the man Cassian was looking at, like he contained the answer to a question my husband had been asking for a long time, did not make me feel like I had been replaced by something better. It made me feel like I had been replaced by something Cassian had never let himself want before, which was its own specific kind of devastating. I closed the photo, locked my phone, put it in my jacket pocket. "Say something funny," I said to Marcus. "Right now, immediately." He blinked. "What?" "I need my brain to do something else for 4 seconds. Go." Marcus, to his eternal credit, did not hesitate. "Devon's enchiladas have a name. He told me before we left. He calls the container Fernando." I stared at him. "He named his leftovers." "He named his leftovers Fernando." "Yes." I pressed my lips together very hard. "That," I said with great dignity, "is the funniest thing I have ever heard in my life." And then, I'm standing on a sidewalk in Capitol Hill with a photo of my husband's emotional affair, saved to my locked phone, and the Rocky Mountains sitting cold and patient in the distance. I laughed, short and real and slightly unhinged. Marcus put his arm around my shoulders. We kept walking. Behind us, 40 blocks north, I felt it, faint as a radio signal losing its tower. Cassian's emotional frequency had shifted. The warmth was still there, but threading through it now, thin and sharp as a wire pulled too tight, was the first note of something new. Unease. He was starting to wonder where I was. Good. We walked another 2 blocks before my phone went off again. This time it was a call. Cassian's name on the screen, same as before, with the same quiet authority it always carried, like even his contact name expected to be answered promptly. I watched it ring. Marcus watched me watch it ring. It stopped. 30 seconds later, another call. I turned my phone completely face down in my jacket pocket and kept walking. Here is something I had learned in 3 years of marriage to Cassian Wolf. He was not a man who called twice. He was a man who called once, left no voicemail because he considered voicemails an inefficient use of everyone's time, and expected the callback to arrive within the hour. It was not arrogance exactly. It was the deeply ingrained habit of a man who had never in his adult life been made to wait for anything he wanted. 2 calls in 4 minutes was, in Cassian Wolf's personal emotional language, the equivalent of anyone else standing in the middle of a room shouting. Something about that sat in my chest like the first sip of something warm. Not satisfaction exactly, something quieter than that. The specific feeling of a person who has been invisible for 6 weeks and has just, for the first time, taken up space. "He's calling again," Marcus observed. "I know. You're not answering." "Correct. How does that feel?" I thought about it honestly. Like finally exhaling after holding my breath for a month and a half. Marcus nodded slowly. "Good answer." We ended up at a coffee shop on East Colfax, the small independent kind with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu, and the particular atmosphere of a place that had decided not to compete with anything and was thriving because of it. I ordered a lavender latte because I deserved something that tasted like a deliberate choice. One, Marcus ordered a black coffee because Marcus Reed approached caffeine the way he approached most things in life, directly and without sentiment. We took a table by the window. Outside, Denver moved. A bus pulled away from a stop. Two college students argued cheerfully about something involving a backpack. A man in a very serious coat walked a very small dog with the dignified energy of an important meeting. Normal, ordinary, the world completely unbothered. I wrapped my hands around my cup and let myself sit inside the moment instead of running ahead to the next one. My phone buzzed on the table. Text this time. Elliot, where are you? No question mark. Cassian never used question marks in texts. He said they looked uncertain. I had once told him that questions were, by definition, uncertain, and he had looked at me like I had said something mildly unreasonable. I picked up the phone, typed out, sent it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Out. Accurate, concise, and communicative. You're enjoying this a little. I am enjoying this a specific, measured amount that is entirely proportional to 6 weeks of smiling at my breakfast plate, I said pleasantly. So yes, a little. His response came in 40 seconds, which was fast for Cassian, who typically typed with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew the other person would wait. Out where? You didn't mention plans. I stared at that for a moment. You didn't mention plans. 3 years. 3 years of him not mentioning plans, not mentioning late nights, not mentioning restaurants in Cherry Creek with dark-haired men who leaned across tables like they already knew they were winning. 3 years of me not requiring an explanation because I was easy, because I was accommodating, because I had confused being low maintenance with being low priority. I set the phone down without responding. Okay, Marcus said quietly, watching my face. What just happened? He said I didn't mention plans. The table went very still. Marcus picked up his coffee, set it down, picked it up again. This was his version of counting to 10. Right, he said finally with tremendous restraint. I know. Because I know, Marcus. I'm just saying that the specific irony of that sentence is genuinely staggering. Yes, I'm aware. I took a long sip of my lavender latte. Boy, it tasted exactly like a deliberate choice. I'm not going to respond to that one. Good call. My phone buzzed 4 more times in the next 10 minutes. I watched each notification arrive and did not touch the screen. Cassian texting in quick succession was the behavioral equivalent of a man who had walked into a room and found it empty when he had absolutely not prepared for it to be empty. The alpha king of the wolf mafia was rattled. I could feel it now, even across the distance. His emotional signal had changed completely. The warmth was gone, tucked away somewhere, replaced by something urgent and disoriented. A frequency I recognized from the early days of our marriage when a deal went sideways and he couldn't immediately identify the variable he'd failed to account for. He was trying to locate the problem. Or he had not yet understood that he was the problem. That would come. I was patient. I looked out the window at the ordinary, beautiful Wednesday street and felt for the first time in 6 weeks like myself. Fully, recognizably, uncomplicatedly myself. Elliot Voss Wolf, 26, Omega, currently drinking a lavender latte in a coffee shop on Colfax while his husband quietly lost his mind 40 blocks away. Gerald was on a sunny windowsill in Capitol Hill. Fernando's structural integrity remained protected, and somewhere in the Rocky Mountain region, the most powerful alpha in Denver was learning, for the very first time, what it felt like to wait. The lavender latte was gone by the time his next message arrived. Not a text, a voice note. Cassian Wolf sent a voice note, which was so far outside the established pattern of his communication style that I actually picked up the phone and stared at it for a full 3 seconds like it had malfunctioned. Cassian did not send voice notes. Cassian considered voice notes an organizational failure. He had once told me with complete seriousness that audio messages were for people who haven't decided what they want to say yet. I pressed play. His voice came through the speaker low and controlled, but underneath the control, threaded through every syllable like a crack running through expensive marble, was something I had not heard from him in a very long time. Uncertainty. Elliot, a pause, not the comfortable kind. I've called 3 times. I need to know you're all right. Text me back or pick up. That's all. The message ended. I played it again. Not because I hadn't heard it, because I wanted to feel it properly, the way you press on a bruise to understand its edges. the urgency underneath the controlled delivery, the specific texture of an alpha who was used to having complete information suddenly operating without any. Marcus was watching me with both hands around his coffee cup. Well, he said. He said that's all, I said. He never says that's all. He never qualifies requests. What does that mean? It means he doesn't know what to do with himself. I set the phone down. It means he's scared. The words sat between us on the table. Marcus tilted his head slowly. Is that good or bad? I thought about it with genuine honesty, the way I'd been trying to think about everything today. Not through the filter of who I'd been performing as for 6 weeks. Just cleanly. Directly. I don't know yet, I said. I did not respond to the voice note. I finished my coffee. Marcus finished his. We sat in the mismatched chairs of that Colfax coffee shop for another 20 minutes, talking about things that had nothing to do with Cassian Wolf, which was its own form of medicine. Marcus told me about a situation at his job involving a passive-aggressive email chain that had escalated to the point where HR had been CC'd. I told him that CCing HR was always either a power move or a cry for help with no middle ground. He said in this case, it was both. I said that tracked. It was good. It was normal. It was the conversational equivalent of solid ground under uncertain feet. When then my phone lit up with a number I recognized immediately because it was saved in my contacts under a name I had not seen on my screen in several months. Roman Wolf, Cassian's younger brother, pack enforcer, a man built like a structural wall and approximately as communicative under normal circumstances. Roman calling me directly meant Cassian had run out of moves and called in support, which meant Cassian was significantly more unraveled than even I had estimated. Marcus looked at the screen. Is that Roman? Yes. He called his brother. He called his brother. We looked at each other. Answer it, Marcus said. I want to know what Roman's voice sounds like when he's been deployed as an emotional errand boy, I answered. Roman, I said pleasantly. A pause. Then Roman's voice, deep and careful, with the particular cadence of a man who had been given specific instructions and was trying to honor them while also being a human being. Elliot, hey. Hey. Another pause. I could feel, even through the phone, the faint second-hand stress radiating off him. Roman's emotional signal was always easier to read than Cassian's, because Roman had never learned to wall himself off the way his older brother had. Right now, he felt like a man standing between two things he couldn't fix simultaneously. So, Roman said carefully, Cass asked me to check in. That's very sweet of him. Roman stopped. Started again. He's having a moment. What kind of moment? The kind where he's called you 6 times and checked the parking garage twice to see if your car was there, and may have also called the building front desk to ask if they'd seen you leave this morning. I closed my eyes briefly. He had called the front desk. Cassian Wolf, Alpha King, head of the most powerful Mafia pack in the Rocky Mountain region, had called the front desk of our building to ask the concierge if his husband had been seen. I pressed my lips together very hard. Across the table, Marcus mouthed the words, "What is happening?" and I held up one finger. I'm fine, Roman, I said. I'm out. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Okay, he exhaled slowly. Can I ask one thing? You can ask. Should he be worried? The coffee shop moved around me. The chalkboard menu. With the mismatched chairs. The ordinary Wednesday afternoon pressing gently against the windows. Should he be worried? 3 weeks and 5 days ago, Cassian had sat beside me on our couch, and his guilt had moved through his hand into mine like a current, and I had said long day, and he had said the usual, and neither of us had told the truth, and we had gone to bed in the same silence we'd been building for months. Should he be worried? Tell him, I said quietly, that I needed some air. Roman was silent for a moment. That's not a no. No, I agreed. It isn't. I heard Roman breathe out slowly on the other end. Felt the weight of what he wasn't saying, which was considerable. Okay, he said finally. Take care of yourself, Elliot. Always do, I said. I ended the call, set the phone on the table, looked at Marcus, who was staring at me with the expression of a man watching a very complicated chess game from a front row seat. He checked the parking garage, I said. Marcus said nothing for a second. Then with great solemnity, Twice. Twice, I confirmed. We sat with that for a moment. Elliot, Marcus said carefully, he's losing it. Yes, I said. What are you going to do? I looked out the window at the cold, bright Denver afternoon, the mountains in the distance, patient and enormous and entirely indifferent to the specific romantic catastrophe unfolding at street level. I'm going to finish losing him first, I said quietly, and then I'm going to figure out what I want to do with the pieces. It was the most honest thing I had said all day. My phone lit up one more time on the table. Cassian again. I turned it face down. Outside, the wind moved through the street and carried the faint, cold smell of incoming snow down from the mountains. And I sat in my chair in a coffee shop on Colfax and felt, through 40 blocks of city and 3 years of marriage, my husband's emotional signal shift one more time. The urgency was still there, but threading through it now, slow and devastating and absolutely unmistakable, was something that cracked me open just slightly despite every intention I had of staying whole. Fear, real fear. The kind that had nothing to do with business or territory or power. The kind that only lived in people who had just realized they were about to lose something they could not replace. I sat very still. "He's afraid," I said softly, to no one in particular. Marcus reached across the table and put his hand over mine. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He was afraid. Real fear. The kind that had nothing to do with business or territory or power. I sat with that feeling for a long time. Not because it changed anything. Not because fear was an apology or an explanation, or any of the things I actually needed from Cassian Wolf. But because I had spent 6 weeks feeling everything he felt and pretending I felt nothing, and I was tired of pretending in either direction. Marcus kept his hand over mine. The coffee shop moved around us, warm and unhurried. Outside, the first snow of the afternoon had started, light and tentative, the kind that dusts windshields and disappears before it can commit to anything. Denver doing what Denver did, beautiful and inconsistent and completely its own, and I watched a single flake dissolve against the window glass. Then I picked up my phone. I did not call Cassian. I texted Roman. Tell him to come alone. No driver, no security. Tell him to come to the coffee shop on East Colfax called Tender Roots. Tell him I said please, which he should understand as me being generous. I put the phone down. Marcus stared at me. "You're meeting him." "I'm giving him the opportunity to show up," I said. "Those are different things." "What's the difference?" "One is forgiveness. The other is information." I straightened in my chair. I want to look at him when he explains himself. I want to feel whether what he says is true. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "And if he lies, then I'll know," I said simply. "I always know." Cassian arrived in 19 minutes, which meant he had been in his car already, which meant Roman had called him the second I ended my text, and Cassian had moved immediately, without his driver, without his security detail, without any of the infrastructure he used to move through the world, as though it owed him passage. He came alone. He pushed through the door of Tender Roots in his charcoal Tom Ford suit, slightly disheveled in a way that Cassian Wolf was genuinely never disheveled, his collar open at the top button, his hair not quite as perfect as it had been this morning. He scanned the room with the focused efficiency of a man who had been scared enough to move fast and was still running on that fear. He found me and stopped. The emotion that hit me from across the coffee shop was so large and unguarded that I actually gripped the edge of the table. Relief. Enormous, crashing, physical relief. The kind that lives in the body, not the mind. And underneath it, raw and undefended in a way I had never felt from him in 3 years. Something that made my chest hurt with its honesty. Shame. He walked to the table, stood across from me, did not sit down until I nodded slightly, which I did after making him stand there for 4 full seconds, because I had earned those 4 seconds and I was going to use them. He sat. We looked at each other. Cassian opened his mouth. "Don't start with an excuse," I said quietly. "Start with the truth." He closed his mouth. Jaw tight, eyes steady on mine with an intensity that would have read as composure to anyone else in the room, and read to me clearly and completely as a man holding himself together by a thread. "His name is Adrian Cole," Cassian said. ELO. Direct. "He's 31. We met 8 months ago through a business contact. 8 months. 2 months before I first felt the shift." I kept my face calm. "Go on." "Nothing physical happened." He said it plainly, without the defensive edge people used when they were asking to be believed. He said it like a fact being submitted as evidence. "I need you to know that." I reached out with that quiet, invisible part of me and felt him say it. True. I exhaled slowly through my nose. But you wanted it to. A pause, his jaw moved. Yes. And you felt things for him that you stopped letting yourself feel for me. The question landed between us like something breakable. Cassian looked at me across the table of a coffee shop on Colfax in the middle of a light Denver snow and did not look away. I got scared, he said, according of how much I needed you. So I started putting distance between us, and then someone else walked into that distance, and I let him. And that was wrong. That was a choice I made, and it was wrong, and I have been living inside that wrongness for 8 months trying to convince myself it was something other than what it was. The coffee shop was quiet around us. I felt every word as he said it. True, true, true. And underneath each truth, woven through all of it, persistent and enormous and completely undiminished by any of the damage he had done. The one feeling I had been most afraid to find because of what it would ask of me. Love. He still loved me. Had never stopped. Had buried it under distance and guilt and the elaborate self-protective architecture of a man who had been taught that needing someone was the same as being vulnerable to them. The match in my chest, the one I had lit this morning, flickered. I looked at my husband. Really looked at him. The open collar, the imperfect hair, the man who had called the building front desk and checked the parking garage twice and driven himself across Denver in 19 minutes without his driver or his security or any of the armor he normally wore through the world. He had come exactly as he was. I felt it, I said quietly. Every time, every shift. Every night you came home carrying feelings that weren't about me. So I felt all of it, and I said nothing because I kept waiting for you to choose me without being asked. Cassian's expression did something complicated and painful. Elliot, I'm not telling you that so you'll feel worse, I said. I'm telling you because you need to understand what you're actually asking forgiveness for. Not just the thing with Adrian, the 6 weeks of silence I sat in, the breakfast plates I smiled at, the voice note I played twice. I paused. You made me invisible, Cassian, in my own marriage, in my own home, and I let you, which is also something I have to live with. He was very still. I know, he said. I know exactly what I did. Do you? I do. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, and for a moment he looked less like the alpha king of the wolf mafia and more like a person who was genuinely, completely out of road. I ended it with Adrian 3 days ago. I felt that too. True. Why 3 days ago, I said. Because I came home and you handed me my coffee and smiled at your plate and something in the way you did it. He stopped, pressed his mouth together. I had felt you pull back, gradually, like a tide. And 3 days ago I realized I couldn't feel you anymore. And I understood what I had done. The snow outside was coming down a little heavier now. Marcus had quietly moved to the counter to order something he definitely did not need, giving us the privacy he had always known how to give without being asked. I looked at Cassian, felt him, all of him. No walls, no distance, no controlled frequency. Just a man sitting in a coffee shop in an open collar, telling the truth for the first time in 8 months because he was more afraid of losing me than he was of being known. This is not instant, I said clearly. Whatever this is, whatever comes next, it is not going to be instant and it is not going to be easy, and you do not get to manage your way through it the way you manage everything else. I know. I will need actual conversations, actual presence. I will need you to sit with me in the discomfort of what you did without trying to fix it before I finish feeling it. I know. And Cassian, I held his gaze. If I ever feel you go somewhere else again, emotionally, the way you did these past months, I will not pack a weekender bag. I will pack everything. And Gerald comes with me. He blinked. Who is Gerald? My succulent. He has been through a lot today and he deserves stability. Something moved across Cassian's face, slow and uncertain, and then, carefully, like a man remembering how to do something he had almost forgotten. A smile. Small. Real. The kind he used to give me in the first year before he got so afraid of needing me that he forgot to show it. The kind I had kept pressed between pages like a flower. My chest pulled tight with something that was not quite forgiveness yet but was standing in its doorway. I named a plant this morning and I said, I left our 43-floor penthouse with a weekender bag and a succulent and my self-respect, and I sat in this coffee shop and did not answer your calls. And I felt every single thing you felt all day long from 40 blocks away. I paused. And I need you to understand who you married, Cassian. Not the version who smiled at his breakfast plate. This version. Cassian looked at me across the table for a long, steady moment. Then he reached forward and placed his hand over mine on the table. The same way he had on the couch 3 weeks and 5 days ago. Except this time, the emotion that moved through that point of contact was not guilt, and it was not relief, and it was not the residual warmth of someone else. It was just him, present, ashamed, trying. I know who I married, he said quietly. I just forgot to act like it. And I am sorry. I am genuinely, completely sorry. I turned my hand over under his. Did not squeeze. Not yet. But I did not pull away. Take me home, I said. We have a long conversation ahead of us, and I want to have it somewhere Gerald can hear it. He's been emotionally invested since 8 a.m. Cassian looked at me. You really named the succulent. He looked like a Gerald. He exhaled, slow and relieved and real. And for just a moment, underneath the shame and the effort, and the very long road still ahead of them, I felt something pulse through his hand into mine. Warmth, directed exactly, completely at me. I stood up, pulled my jacket on. Also, I said, I know you called the front desk. Cassian closed his eyes briefly. Roman told you. Roman told me. I picked up Gerald from the windowsill. You checked the parking garage twice, Cassian. I was concerned. You were panicking. I was, he said quietly, terrified. I looked at him standing in the middle of a coffee shop on Colfax in his imperfect suit with his honest eyes and his enormous, clumsy, main architecture of avoidance love, and I felt the match in my chest change, not extinguish, transform, warm and steady now, held carefully, directed. Good, I said softly. Hold on to that feeling. It means you know what you almost lost. I walked to the door. He followed. Outside, Denver was fully snowing now, soft and committed and covering everything in quiet white. The mountains patient in the distance, the city settling into its afternoon. Marcus was leaning against the wall outside with his coffee cup and the deeply satisfied expression of a man who had been right about something important and was not going to say so because he was occasionally a good person. He looked at us standing together on the sidewalk, looked at Gerald in my arms. Fernando is safe, he said solemnly. Fernando was never in question, I said, as Cassian looked between us. Who is Fernando? Devin's enchiladas, Marcus said. It's a long story, I said. Get in the car. I'll explain on the way home. Cassian looked at me with that small, careful smile, the one I had kept and almost let go of and was, cautiously and without any guarantee of how the next weeks would unfold, choosing to keep a little longer. He opened the car door. I got in. He got in. And for the first time all day, sitting in the front seat of his car in the middle of a Denver snowfall, with a succulent in my lap and a marriage that was broken in specific, now visible, now nameable places, I felt his emotional frequency settle next to mine. Not perfect, not fixed, but present. Right beside me, exactly where it was supposed to be. That was enough to begin. Thank you for watching this story to the end. As if you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even crazier and more intriguing than you can imagine. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. The next story drops soon.